Ancient city blueprints hide a secret global network. Across deserts and jungles, the master plans of medieval Cairo and Angkor Wat show uncanny similarities in their design. By the end of this, you will see the medieval world not as a collection of isolated cultures, but as a single, interconnected conversation. How did builders thousands of miles apart use the same sacred geometry and celestial alignments? What does this lost network tell us about our own world today? These blueprints are not ink on parchment, but ideas carved into the earth itself. They are the master plans, the grand designs that guided the hands of countless builders, encoded directly into the city's streets, temples, and walls. To understand them, you must look beyond the individual buildings to the overarching pattern. Consider the sheer scale of Angkor Wat, its central towers perfectly aligned with the sun during the equinoxes, a colossal calendar in stone. Or look to the original foundation of Cairo, laid out with geometric precision as a perfect square, its gates and main avenues positioned according to celestial and symbolic principles. These layouts were not accidental. They were the physical expression of a civilization's deepest beliefs about the cosmos, its understanding of sacred geometry, and its most advanced engineering knowledge. A city's blueprint was its DNA, containing the core instructions for how it should function, grow, and connect the lives of its people to a higher order. When we study these plans, we are not just looking at old ruins. We are reading the minds of the master builders, deciphering their intentions from the silent language of alignment and proportion. With this foundational understanding, we can begin our journey to a specific city that offers a stunningly clear piece of this global puzzle. Medieval Cairo's blueprint was a deliberate act of world building. When the Fatimid caliphs laid its foundations in 969, they were not merely plotting streets and walls, they were inscribing a celestial grid onto the earth. The entire city was designed as a perfect square, a geometric shape symbolizing cosmic order and stability. Its main thoroughfares were not placed for convenience alone. They were aligned with specific stars, turning the city into a vast terrestrial map of the heavens. The Grand Palace Complex and the Al-Azhar Mosque were not just important buildings. They were anchor points in this sacred geometry, placed with mathematical precision to channel divine favor and assert the ruler's role as the link between heaven and earth. This was urban planning as a spiritual and political act. The city itself became a physical argument, its orderly streets and perfect angles legitimizing the caliph's power by demonstrating his alignment with the universe itself. Such a design required more than just visionary architects. It demanded an advanced understanding of astronomy to track the stars and a masterful grasp of geometry to translate those celestial paths into a city plan. This level of sophistication forces a compelling question. Was Cairo's cosmic blueprint an isolated masterpiece, a brilliant flash of genius in the medieval world? Or was this intricate knowledge part of a wider, shared tradition that spanned continents? To find the answer, we must journey far to the east. Far to the east, in the humid jungles of Cambodia, the blueprint for Angkor reveals a city built for water. This was not a dense urban center, but a sprawling, low-density metropolis masterfully engineered around a single, life-giving element. Its true genius lies not in its iconic temples alone, but in the vast hydraulic network that formed its foundational plan. An intricate web of canals, massive reservoirs known as barrages, and wide moats coursed through the landscape. This system did far more than control water for agriculture. It was the city's spiritual and economic heart, a physical representation of the Hindu cosmos. The berets symbolized the primordial ocean, while the central temple mountain, Angkor Wat, rose from its center as the axis of the world. The sheer scale of this engineering is staggering. The West Baray Reservoir alone is an artificial lake measuring 5 miles long by 1 mile wide, a feat that required surveying and logistical skill on an almost unimaginable level for its time. And just like Cairo, this earthly design was mirrored in the heavens. The central towers of Angkor Wat were precisely aligned so that during the equinoxes, the sun would rise directly over its central peak, a perfect fusion of architecture and astronomy. How could two cities, one in the arid deserts of Egypt and the other in the monsoon-drenched jungles of Southeast Asia, both encode such similar cosmic principles into their blueprints? Both used water and geometry as sacred elements. Both aligned their central structures with celestial bodies. The parallels are too profound, too specific to be mere coincidence. They point toward a shared understanding of the universe, a common language of sacred design spoken by master builders a world apart. This is our first major clue, and it forces a difficult question. How could this knowledge have traveled such vast and seemingly impassable distances? The same sacred patterns appear in both the sand and the stone. Look past the different climates and building materials, and you will find a shared geometric language embedded in the very bones of these cities. In Cairo, the perfect square of the city walls was just the beginning. The placement of its main gates, the proportions of the Al-Azhar Mosque, the very dimensions of the Grand Palace complex all resonate with the golden ratio. This is not just a pleasing proportion. To the medieval mind, this specific ratio, approximately 1.618 to 1, was a divine constant, a key to harmony found in the spiral of a seashell and the arrangement of petals on a flower. Building with these proportions was believed to infuse a structure with spiritual resonance, to make it a conduit between the earthly and the celestial. Far away in Angkor, the blueprint speaks the same mathematical tongue. The entire temple complex is a massive, precise mandala. A mandala is a geometric configuration of symbols, a cosmic diagram representing the universe. The 5 towers of Angkor Wat form a perfect quincunx, a central tower surrounded by 4 others, mirroring the sacred Mount Meru of Hindu and Buddhist cosmology, which stands at the center of the universe. Every wall, every moat, and every gateway is positioned according to this intricate geometric model, creating a stone universe where every pilgrim could walk a path to the divine center. This is the stunning connection: 2 different faiths, 2 different continents, yet both master builders reached for the same set of geometric tools to map the cosmos onto the earth. This points to something far deeper than independent invention. It suggests the existence of a shared, sophisticated knowledge of sacred geometry, a universal language of form and proportion understood by elite architects across the globe. But a language requires speakers, and an idea needs a pathway. How did these complex, specific blueprints for cosmic order find their way into the minds of builders separated by thousands of miles of desert, ocean, and mountain ranges? The answer may be simpler than you think, written in the footsteps of merchants and pilgrims along the most well-traveled routes of the medieval world. Silk and spices were merely the visible surface of this ancient exchange. The true wealth moving along those dusty caravan tracks was intellectual. Think of a merchant caravan not just laden with bolts of cloth and bags of pepper, but also carrying carefully rolled parchments. These were not trade manifests, but star charts, mathematical treatises, and perhaps even sketches of city layouts. A Persian scholar's breakthrough in astronomy could travel for months, eventually informing the work of a court astronomer in China. A Byzantine architect's solution for a domed roof could find its way to a building site in northern India. This was the real function of the Silk Road, a global nervous system for the transfer of knowledge. It acted as the medieval equivalent of the Internet, a slow but astonishingly effective network for sharing the most advanced ideas of the age. This is the most plausible pathway for the shared blueprints we see in Cairo and Angkor. A master builder in Cambodia did not need to meet an Egyptian architect personally. The core principles of sacred geometry, the mathematical ratios for harmonic design, and the techniques for celestial alignment could have been transmitted step by step from one learned traveler to another across thousands of miles. A pilgrim heading to a holy site might carry these ideas in his memory. A scholar seeking patronage in a foreign court would bring his books. This constant, slow-motion conversation among the educated elite created an invisible college that spanned continents. The Silk Road provided the physical wires, and ideas were the data flowing through them. It was this flow that breathed life into the hidden network, allowing a concept born in one desert to take root and flourish in a distant jungle. Yet, even this vast web of trails and trading posts was not the only channel for this profound exchange. While the Silk Road carved paths across continents, another vast network moved upon the water. The Indian Ocean and the South China Sea were not barriers, but bustling aquatic highways. For centuries, the great Chinese treasure fleets of Admiral Zheng, he sailed these routes alongside the nimble dhows of Arab and Indian merchants. This maritime web was the sea-bound sibling of the overland routes, and it pulsed with a different kind of energy. Where caravan tracks were slow and deliberate, the sea lanes offered swifter passage for people, goods, and crucially, for ideas. Port cities like Malacca, Calicut, and Zanzibar became the nerve centers of this system. They were not just places to trade spices and silk. They were vibrant, international melting pots where a shipwright from Gujarat could share designs with a carpenter from Canton, where an Arab navigator schooled in the stars could compare notes with a Javanese sailor. In these crowded harbors, the most valuable cargo was often knowledge. The techniques for building stronger ships, the secrets of navigating by the wind and constellations, and the principles for designing efficient port cities were all exchanged freely. This is why we see such strikingly similar blueprints for coastal hubs from the Swahili coast of East Africa all the way to the islands of Southeast Asia. They all featured the same core components: a heavily fortified administrative center, carefully planned docks and warehouses that maximized access to the tides, and defensive walls designed to withstand both siege and storm. This was not a case of independent invention. It was the result of a continuous global conversation happening right on the docks. A merchant arriving in a new port would see what worked. He would observe the layout of the quays, the strength of the sea walls, and he would carry those observations to the next port, where local builders would adapt and improve upon them. This maritime network ensured that the most advanced concepts in urban planning could bypass the mountains and deserts that sometimes stalled land-based travel, creating a truly fluid, global circulation of architectural intelligence. And the proof of this exchange is not locked away in the stone of these cities alone. It is preserved in the very maps that guided these intrepid voyages, charts that detailed not just coastlines but the flow of knowledge itself. These medieval maps were far more than decorative curiosities. They were functional tools, dense with information for those who knew how to read them. Take the Catalan Atlas, a sprawling masterpiece created in 1375. It was not the product of a single culture. Its maker, a Jewish cartographer named Cresques Abraham, wove together the geographic knowledge of Arab travelers, Jewish scholars, and Christian missionaries. His map showed not just the shape of continents, but the intricate web of trade routes connecting them, from the markets of Europe to the gold-rich kingdoms of West Africa and the distant ports of Asia. It presented the world not as a collection of isolated places, but as a single, interconnected system. Even more revealing are the Portolan charts, the practical sea maps used by Mediterranean sailors. To the modern eye, they look like a spider's web of lines crisscrossing the sea. Those lines are not decorations. They are room lines, direct routes between ports that accounted for prevailing winds and currents. The coastlines on these charts, drawn from the lived experience of countless unnamed mariners, are so accurate that they rival maps made centuries later. They did not just depict land, they charted relationships, the proximity of one safe harbor to another, the location of a freshwater spring just inland from a beach, the best coves to wait out a storm. These maps were the physical embodiment of the Maritime Network, a collective memory of the sea written on vellum. By tracing these lines, we can almost see the path a ship might have taken, carrying not just silk and spices, but perhaps a scroll detailing the geometric principles behind a great city's design. The maps are the surviving blueprints for the network of exchange itself. Yet a map can only suggest the possibility of a journey. To confirm that these routes were actually traveled by the architects of our global blueprint, we need to find the objects they left behind. These everyday objects became the unsuspecting couriers of cosmic blueprints. Take the humble astrolabe, an intricate brass instrument used by astronomers and navigators to map the heavens. From the workshops of Spain to the royal courts of India, surviving examples are nearly identical in their complex design. This was not a local tool. It was a global standard, a physical proof that the same sophisticated understanding of the stars was in use across continents. A sailor in the Indian Ocean could use his astrolabe to navigate by the same stars that guided a scholar in Cairo plotting the alignment of a new city gate. The knowledge was literally in their hands, but the exchange went far beyond scientific instruments. Look at the ceramics and textiles that moved along these routes. A simple bowl, traded for its practical use, might be decorated with a repeating geometric pattern, a labyrinth of interlocking shapes known as the tree of life or an endless knot. These were not just pretty decorations, they were dense with symbolic meaning representing cosmic order, eternal life, and the interconnectedness of all things. And here is the crucial link. That exact same pattern fired onto a pot in Persia could be found carved in stone as a sacred mandala on the walls of a temple in Cambodia, or encoded into the very street plan of a distant city. A ceramic fragment excavated from an Egyptian market might hold the key to understanding the proportional system used to design a temple complex thousands of miles away. These artifacts were more than trade goods. They were the cultural and intellectual DNA of the medieval world, packaged and shipped across deserts and oceans. When a merchant unrolled a bolt of silk embroidered with a celestial map, he was not just selling cloth, he was disseminating a worldview. When a pilgrim carried a small, patterned ivory box as a relic, he was carrying a set of architectural principles. By tracing the physical trail of these objects, we can reconstruct the invisible pathways of ideas. We can watch as a decorative motif, born in one culture's art, evolves into a foundational geometric principle in another culture's city blueprint. This movement of objects makes the abstract network tangible. It proves that the shared designs of Cairo and Angkor were not a mystical coincidence, but the direct result of a constant, bustling exchange of goods, people, and the profound ideas they carried with them. This evidence solidifies the network, but it also raises a deeper, more unsettling question about the world these builders were trying to create. The stars were the original architects. Across the globe, from the plains of Egypt to the jungles of Central America, master builders looked to the same night sky for their instructions. This was the first and most profound principle of their hidden network, a universal drive to align the earthly with the celestial. The Great Pyramids of Giza are not just pointed at the sky. One of their narrow shafts targets the pole star Thuban, which anchored the celestial north for the ancient Egyptians. Far across the Atlantic, the Maya built the Pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza so precisely that during the equinoxes, the play of light and shadow creates the illusion of a serpent slithering down its steps, a direct conversation with the sun. Even the soaring Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe, like Chartres, were meticulously oriented so the rising sun on the summer solstice would flood the central nave with light, illuminating specific sacred spots. This was far more than creating a calendar. It was an act of cosmic harmony. By mapping the predictable, perfect movements of the stars and planets onto their cities and temples, these cultures were trying to ground their own chaotic human existence in a higher, divine order. The blueprint of a city was a mirror of the heavens, a map of the sky made permanent in stone. To achieve this, the builders required more than just faith. They needed an incredibly sophisticated and shared body of technical knowledge, the ability to track the slow precession of stars over centuries, the mathematics to calculate precise angles, and the surveying skill to translate those angles onto a colossal scale. These were not skills that developed in isolation. This advanced astronomy and geometry were the most valuable intellectual commodities traded along the hidden network, passed from one elite group of scholars to another. They were building a world in the image of the cosmos, and just as they sought alignment with the heavens, they applied the same sacred principles to the most vital element on Earth, the flow of water itself. Water was the lifeblood of these cosmic blueprints, a sacred element to be mastered with both reverence and genius. Across the world, the most brilliant civilizations viewed hydraulic engineering not as a mere utility, but as a spiritual duty. The vast barrays of Angkor were just one expression of this profound belief. In the arid landscapes of Persia, engineers constructed breathtakingly complex qanat systems. These were not simple wells, but underground channels that tapped into mountain aquifers, using gravity to carry fresh water for dozens of miles to cities and farms, all while preventing evaporation under the desert sun. In India, this philosophy was carved straight down into the earth, creating magnificent stepwells. These were not just sources of water, but inverted temples, with ornate staircases descending past countless sculpted pillars to reach the water table, turning a practical necessity into a place of pilgrimage, ritual, and community. Even the legacy of Roman aqueducts, with their majestic arches carrying water across valleys, persisted deep into the medieval era, a testament to an unbroken tradition of viewing water control as the pinnacle of civilized achievement. The engineering knowledge required for these feats was immense. It demanded a deep understanding of hydrology to locate underground sources, a masterful grasp of gradients to ensure a consistent flow, and the mathematical skill to design vast, stable reservoirs. That cultures from the deserts of the Middle East to the jungles of Southeast Asia all developed such sophisticated and spiritually charged water systems is staggering. It suggests something far more powerful than parallel invention. It points to a shared hydraulic ideology, a core tenet of the hidden network's architectural philosophy. The belief that to properly order a city, you must first master the flow of its most divine resource. But who were the individuals that carried this sacred, technical knowledge across mountains and seas? These master builders were the anonymous engineers of a global vision. They were not kings or conquerors whose names fill the history books, but stonemasons, architects, and hydraulic engineers who carried their knowledge in their hands and in their minds. They moved along the same silk roads and sea lanes as the merchants, but their cargo was far more precious. It was the secret of how to build. In Europe, guilds of Freemasons guarded their techniques as sacred mysteries, passing down complex geometric rules from master to apprentice. These men were not bound by nationality. A master mason who perfected his craft on the soaring cathedrals of France might next find himself employed on a fortress in Bohemia or a palace in Sicily, bringing his unique understanding of stress, weight, and sacred proportion with him. This movement was even more pronounced across the vast expanse of Asia. Historical records from the Persian court mention the employment of Chinese engineers, specialists brought in to design and oversee massive construction projects, their expertise traded as a royal commodity. At the same time, the groundbreaking mathematical texts of Arab scholars, filled with the very geometry needed for celestial alignment and complex arch construction, were being translated in European monasteries, fundamentally reshaping Western architecture. These individuals were the living, breathing nodes of the hidden network. They possessed a rare and powerful trinity of skills. First was raw, practical craftsmanship, the ability to shape stone and direct laborers. Second was advanced mathematical knowledge, allowing them to translate cosmic principles into buildable plans. And third, perhaps most importantly, was a deep spiritual understanding. They knew they were not just constructing buildings, but creating portals to the divine, physical representations of a cosmic order. This shared purpose meant that a blueprint drawn up by one master builder could be intuitively understood by another, even if they spoke different languages. The plan for a city, with its geometric proportions and celestial alignments, became a form of universal, non-verbal communication. A master from Cairo could look at the plan for Angkor and recognize the sacred quincunx, the symbolic mountains, and the water-based mandala. He would see a colleague's work, not a foreigner's puzzle. They were the human conduits, the agents who implemented a shared vision of the ideal city across the globe. And the common tongue that allowed this silent conversation to happen, the fundamental language of their entire network, was the unshakable logic of mathematics. This mathematical cipher was the silent language that made the entire network possible. It was a code built not on words, but on numbers and shapes, a system of proportions so universal that it could be understood from Cairo to Cambodia. The master builders wielded irrational numbers like pi and phi with the ease of a poet using a familiar alphabet. These were not cold calculations. They were seen as divine constants, the fundamental ratios that the universe itself used to build a spiral galaxy or the chamber of a nautilus shell. To use them in a city's design was to weave the very fabric of creation into its streets and temples. This is why a Gothic cathedral's floor plan, laid out with a series of interlocking squares and circles based on the golden ratio, can evoke the same profound sense of harmony and awe as the prayer hall of a great Ottoman mosque, which uses the very same geometric progression to define its space. The architectural styles are completely different, one soaring with pointed arches and stained glass, the other dominated by vast domes and intricate tilework. Yet they both speak the same underlying mathematical language. This shared cipher allowed a master mason from France to look at the blueprint for a temple in India and instantly grasp the architect's intention. He would recognize the sacred geometry, the harmonic ratios governing the relationship between a courtyard's width and a tower's height. He would see a colleague's work, not a foreign puzzle. This mathematical operating system ensured that the core principles of cosmic order could be perfectly replicated, even as the surface details were adapted to local materials, climates, and beliefs. The knowledge of this cipher was far too valuable to be left to chance or casual trade. Its preservation and transmission required a powerful, enduring institution, one that could protect this sacred science across generations and vast distances. These quiet cloisters and bustling schools became the hard drives of the medieval mind. While merchants and master builders carried knowledge along the physical routes, it was within the walls of monasteries and madrasas that this precious information was stored, catalogued, and amplified. In Europe, the rhythmic life of a Benedictine monk was not solely dedicated to prayer. For centuries, the scriptorium was a hive of intellectual activity, where monks meticulously copied not just religious works, but also the surviving classical texts of geometry, engineering, and astronomy. They preserved the works of Euclid and Vitruvius, the very mathematical foundations upon which sacred architecture was built. Without their patient, ink-stained labor, the geometric ciphers that defined the master builder's craft might have been lost forever. Meanwhile, in the vibrant intellectual capitals of the Islamic world, a parallel and even more dynamic process was underway. Institutions like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad were not mere libraries. They were vast translation bureaus, research centers, and universities rolled into one. Here, teams of scholars, paid by caliphs to seek out knowledge from every corner of the known world, would gather. They translated the entire corpus of Greek science, from the geometry of Euclid to the astronomy of Ptolemy, into Arabic, but they did not stop there. They also absorbed the advanced mathematical concepts from India, including the revolutionary idea of zero, and synthesized them with Persian engineering treatises. This created a new, supercharged body of global knowledge. A single text on celestial mechanics used by an architect in Cairo could be a hybrid masterpiece containing Greek theory, Indian numerals, and Persian practical applications, all thanks to the scholarly synthesis in Baghdad. The flow of this information was astonishingly direct. A monk in a Spanish monastery under Muslim rule might be translating an Arabic text on astronomy that was itself a translation of a Greek original, all while adding his own marginal notes. That single manuscript traveling from Baghdad to Spain could then be carried by a pilgrim to a building site in France, where a master mason would interpret its geometric diagrams. This was the institutional backbone of the hidden network. These hubs of learning provided the stable, enduring environment where fragile knowledge could be protected from the chaos of wars and the decay of time. They guaranteed that a master builder in Cambodia and an architect in Egypt were, in a very real sense, reading from the same global library, working from the same set of core instructions for ordering a city in harmony with the cosmos. This vast, interlinked system of knowledge seems almost impossibly sophisticated for its time. It forces us to reconsider the very definition of the so-called Dark Ages, revealing a world pulsing with intellectual light. But what happens when this network, this delicate web of exchange, is suddenly severed? What occurs when the lights in these great libraries begin to go out? The stone and glass of Chartres Cathedral appear to have little in common with the red and white arches of Córdoba's great mosque. One soars towards the heavens with pointed spires, the other expands horizontally in a seemingly endless prayer hall. Yet if you could see their blueprints laid side by side, you would witness a silent conversation happening across centuries and cultures. Chartres, rising in France in the 11th century, was built upon a foundation of pure geometry. Its entire floor plan is a complex interplay of squares and circles, a mathematical ballet where every arch, every window, and the very length of the nave is determined by harmonic ratios. This geometry was not hidden. It was made manifest in the cathedral's famous labyrinth, a circular path laid into the floor that guides a pilgrim on a meditative, geometric journey to a spiritual center. The builders of Chartres used these precise proportions to create an atmosphere of transcendence, a feeling that one has stepped out of the chaotic, earthly world and into a space of divine order. Now travel south to the Great Mosque of Córdoba, constructed earlier under the Umayyad dynasty. You stand in a forest of over 800 columns, where striped double arches recede into the distance in a breathtaking, rhythmic repetition. This is not random beauty, it is a masterclass in modular geometry. The entire prayer hall is built from a single, repeating geometric unit. The placement of every column, the span of every arch, adheres to a strict proportional system, creating a sense of infinite, peaceful expansion. The goal was the same as at Chartres, to use mathematical harmony to evoke a direct, emotional connection to the divine. The architectural styles are worlds apart, one Gothic and the other Islamic. But their underlying philosophy is a perfect mirror. Both sets of builders were using the same sacred language of shape and number to achieve the same spiritual end. This profound similarity is no accident. It points to a shared well of architectural knowledge that flowed through medieval Spain, a vibrant crossroads where Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars and artisans exchanged ideas freely. The master mason drafting the plans for Chartres may never have set foot in Córdoba, but he was likely working within a tradition that had absorbed and adapted the geometric principles perfected there. The blueprint for transcendence was a shared document, and its pages were written in the universal language of mathematics. A labyrinth is more than a maze. It is a single, winding path leading unerringly to a center, a physical prayer for those who walk its course. This exact symbol, carved into the stone floor of Chartres Cathedral in France, appears thousands of years earlier on the island of Crete. It is the same idea, the same blueprint for a spiritual journey, expressed in two different worlds. This is the deeper layer of the hidden network, a language of symbols embedded directly into the city plans. Beyond the cold precision of mathematics, the master builders were weaving profound, recurring motifs that spoke directly to the human soul. The mandala is another universal word in this symbolic language. In the East, it is a cosmic diagram, an intricate circle representing the universe used in Hindu and Buddhist meditation. But at Angkor Wat and the Javanese temple of Borobudur, the mandala is not just drawn on paper. The entire temple complex is the mandala, built in stone. Pilgrims do not look at it, they walk through it, moving from the outer realms of illusion toward the enlightened center. This is a blueprint you can experience with your own feet, a spiritual map made real. Then there is the axis mundi, the world axis. This is the belief in a central pole that connects heaven, earth, and the underworld. You can see it in the soaring spire of a Gothic cathedral, piercing the clouds. You see it in the graceful stupa of a Buddhist temple, a solid representation of the Buddha's mind reaching for enlightenment. And you see it in the stepped pyramids of the Maya, their summits acting as stages for rituals that bridge the human and divine realms. These are not random decorative choices. They are the fundamental reason these structures were built. The labyrinth, the mandala, the axis mundi, these symbols were the very purpose of the blueprint. Their persistent appearance across continents is perhaps the most compelling evidence for a shared vision. How could the need to walk a labyrinthine path to a center be felt so strongly by a medieval French monk and a Minoan priest king? How could the idea of a world mountain be so vividly expressed in both the jungles of Cambodia and the plains of Mesoamerica? This points to a lingua franca of sacred space, a common set of archetypal forms that resonated with humanity's deepest questions about their place in the cosmos. The network did not just transmit engineering techniques, it carried a complete symbolic toolkit for building meaning into the world. Could these global patterns simply be a case of great minds thinking alike? It is a compelling and perfectly reasonable argument. After all, human beings everywhere share the same fundamental needs for shelter, community, and a connection to the divine. Faced with the same sun and stars, is it any wonder that cultures separated by continents would all look to the heavens for guidance? This idea, often called the psychic unity of mankind, suggests that we are all wired to seek order in the cosmos, and that this shared wiring could naturally lead to parallel inventions. An agricultural society dependent on the seasons will almost inevitably notice the solstices and want to mark them. A community reliant on monsoon rains will logically develop systems to store water. From this perspective, the similar blueprints of Cairo and Angkor could be seen not as evidence of a network, but as a beautiful, coincidental convergence of the human spirit. But this is where the plot truly thickens. The argument begins to fray when we examine the sheer specificity of the designs. It is one thing for two cultures to build a wall facing the sunrise. It is something else entirely for both of them to calculate the exact angle of that sunrise using the same complex geometric constant, the golden ratio, and then encode that precise angle into the foundational plan of an entire city. Think of it like two chefs independently inventing a cake. It is plausible they would both use flour, sugar, and eggs, but if both of their recipes called for exactly 3/4 of a teaspoon of a rare saffron, folded into the batter at precisely 120 strokes, you would start to suspect they had shared a cookbook. This is the level of specificity we are dealing with. The celestial alignments are not just general, they are mathematically precise. The water management is not just functional. The barrays of Angkor were not just big ponds, they were geometrically perfect massive rectangles oriented to the cardinal directions, serving as symbolic oceans in a cosmic model. This goes far beyond practical necessity and into the realm of a shared, non-intuitive symbolic language. The convergence on such intricate and ideologically charged solutions is what tilts the scales decisively away from pure coincidence. It points toward an exchange not just of a good idea, but of a complete and sophisticated intellectual package, a detailed set of instructions for building a universe in miniature. This intricate web of exchange, however, was not built to last forever. The 13th century marked the beginning of the end for this shared conversation. The first major blow came thundering from the steppes. The Mongol invasions, while initially creating a brief period of stability known as the Pax Mongolica, ultimately unleashed waves of chaos that shattered the Silk Road's delicate equilibrium. Caravan routes that had been safe for centuries became perilous, and the great overland artery that had pulsed with ideas began to clot and falter. Then came an even more invisible and devastating enemy. In the 14th century, the Black Death swept across continents, a pandemic that did not discriminate between scholar and merchant. It decimated populations, emptied cities, and severed the very human connections that the network relied upon. Trade collapsed, travel became synonymous with death, and the intellectual hubs that depended on a constant flow of people were left isolated and silent. The world turned inward, focused on survival, and the threads of the global conversation began to snap one by one. The final, symbolic severing of the old world from the new occurred in 1453 with the fall of Constantinople. That magnificent city had been the great nexus, the primary gateway where the knowledge, goods, and people of East and West met and mingled. Its conquest by the Ottoman Empire slammed that gate shut, permanently altering the flow of ideas and forcing Europe to look for new routes to the riches of the East. This search, the famed age of exploration, did indeed create new global networks, but they were of a fundamentally different character. the ships that now crossed the oceans were not primarily carrying scholars and architectural treatises. They were instruments of empire, their holds filled with the ambitions of competing nation-states, their missions focused on extraction, colonization, and control. The new exchanges were often coercive, built on exploitation rather than the mutual curiosity that had once fueled the master builders. In this new, fragmented world, the old cosmopolitan vision faded. The shared language of sacred geometry and celestial alignment was forgotten by the mainstream, surviving only in secretive esoteric traditions and the guarded notebooks of a few remaining Masonic guilds. The blueprint for a harmonious world, once a global project, was lost. The principles of this hidden network did not vanish entirely with the fall of Constantinople. They merely went underground, lying dormant like seeds, waiting for the right conditions to sprout once more. That moment arrived with the Renaissance in Europe, a cultural explosion fueled by a hunger for forgotten knowledge. Scholars, artists, and architects began scouring monastic libraries and, crucially, looking to the Islamic world, where the great texts of antiquity had been meticulously preserved and expanded upon. The very intellectual hubs of the medieval network, like the translation centers of Spain and Sicily, became the source for this rebirth. Figures like Leonardo da Vinci were not isolated geniuses conjuring ideas from nothing. They were voracious consumers of these recovered texts, absorbing the intricate rules of sacred geometry and proportion that had once guided the builders of Cairo and Angkor. You can see this direct lineage in Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, a perfect fusion of art and science that maps the human form onto the ideal geometric shapes of the circle and the square. This was not a new idea. It was the rediscovery of a core tenet of the old network, the belief that the same mathematical principles governing the cosmos are reflected in the microcosm of the human body. The Renaissance was, in essence, the first great attempt to reassemble the pieces of a shattered global conversation. This thread of rediscovery continued to weave its way through history. During the Enlightenment, a new wave of thinkers became fascinated with universal systems and secret societies. Freemasonry, with its symbolic use of the compass and square, its rituals built around the figure of the master builder, explicitly saw itself as the guardian of this lost architectural wisdom. Enlightenment philosophers and Masons were, in their own way, trying to piece the network back together. They sensed a profound truth hidden in the geometry of ancient structures, a universal language that could offer a blueprint for a more perfect society. Yet, they were often working with fragments, unaware of the network's truly global and medieval scale. They looked to Rome and Greece, but they did not yet have the tools to see the connections stretching all the way to Cambodia. This process of rediscovery has only accelerated in our own time, powered by technologies the medieval master builders could never have conceived. Satellite imagery and LIDAR scanning now allow us to see the ghostly outlines of ancient cities beneath jungle canopies and desert sands, revealing the full, breathtaking scope of their geometric plans. Digital analysis can instantly calculate the proportions of a temple in India and compare them to a cathedral in France, confirming with mathematical certainty the shared language we once could only intuit. We are now the new cartographers of this lost world, using lasers and algorithms to retrace the routes of the old network. We are finally beginning to understand that the isolated marvels of the ancient world were never really isolated at all. They were part of a single, sprawling conversation, a project to build a world in harmony with the cosmos, whose echoes we are only now learning to hear again. A new golden age of discovery is now unfolding, powered by technologies that see through Earth and jungle alike. LIDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging, works by firing millions of laser pulses from an aircraft. When these pulses bounce back from the ground, they create a precise three-dimensional map of the surface, effectively peeling away the dense vegetation that has hidden the truth for centuries. In the jungles around Angkor, this technology did not just find a few new temples. It revealed a sprawling, low-density metropolis the size of modern Los Angeles, with an intricate grid of canals, roads, and neighborhood blocks connecting what were once thought to be isolated religious sites. The blueprint was there all along, etched into the landscape, but we simply could not see it until now. This is not just mapping, it is a form of digital resurrection, bringing a lost city back to life from a blanket of green. The same revolution is happening in the deserts. Satellite imagery can detect subtle differences in soil moisture and composition, outlining the ghostly footprints of walls and roads buried for 1,000 years. Ground-penetrating radar sends signals deep into the earth, revealing the foundations of structures hidden beneath the sands of Egypt or even under the streets of modern European cities. We are no longer guessing at the scale of medieval urban planning, we are measuring it with scientific certainty. Perhaps the most profound application is in the digital recreation of ancient skies. Archaeoastronomers can now use sophisticated software to roll back the clock, simulating the exact position of stars on the night a city's foundation stone was laid. This allows us to confirm beyond any doubt that the main avenue of a city was aligned with the rising of a specific star, or that a temple's doorway was designed to capture the solstice sunrise. What was once a theoretical connection is now a verifiable fact. This hard data provides the final, undeniable piece of evidence for the network. We can now prove that the similarities between distant cities were not just aesthetic choices or vague spiritual parallels. They were the result of deliberate, sophisticated engineering and a shared intellectual framework. The master builders were not just artists, they were cosmic cartographers, and we are finally able to read their maps. Synthesizing all of this evidence reveals a stunningly coherent picture. The shared geometry, the precise celestial alignments, the spiritually charged water systems, and the physical artifacts scattered along trade routes, they all point to one inescapable conclusion. This was not a top-down empire issuing decrees. It was something far more resilient and organic, a decentralized web of human connection. Imagine a vast, sprawling neural network, with ideas sparking and traveling along countless pathways simultaneously. The Silk Road was one major artery, the bustling maritime routes of the Indian Ocean were another, but the true strength of this system was its redundancy. Knowledge did not rely on a single king or a single road. It moved with traveling master builders, in the saddlebags of scholars, and within the guarded manuscripts of monasteries and madrasas. This multi-channel flow ensured that if one route was severed by war or plague, the conversation could find another way to continue. What was being exchanged was not merely a building technique, but a complete philosophical package. It was a set of core principles for constructing a city that served multiple, intertwined purposes. It had to be spiritually potent, a place where heaven met earth. It had to be economically viable, with efficient water management and defensible walls. And above all, it had to exist in a state of demonstrable harmony with the cosmic order. This shared vision, transmitted and adapted over centuries, is why the foundational blueprints of a city in the Egyptian desert and a metropolis in the Cambodian jungle feel like they are speaking the same language. They are two distinct dialects of a single, global architectural tongue. We are not looking at independent inventions, but at distant relatives in a vast, scattered family, whose family resemblance we are only now, with our new technological eyes, beginning to fully recognize and appreciate. This hidden network shatters the old story of the Dark Ages. Our traditional history books often paint the medieval period as a time of isolated cultures, a fragmented world waiting for the Renaissance to reconnect it. But the architectural conversations between Cairo and Angkor tell a completely different tale. This was not an age of darkness and isolation. It was an era of brilliant globalism, a time when a master builder in Cambodia could be working from the same cosmic playbook as an astronomer in Egypt. The technological and artistic achievements we see in these cities, from the vast hydraulic engineering of Angkor to the celestial precision of Cairo, were not local flukes. They were the direct results of a continuous, bustling exchange of the most advanced ideas on the planet. The rigid boundaries we imagine between East and West, between the Christian and Islamic worlds, begin to dissolve. These were not impenetrable walls, but porous membranes through which knowledge constantly seeped and flowed. A mathematical concept born in India could be refined in Baghdad, transmitted to a scholar in Muslim Spain, and finally find its way into the geometric plans of a cathedral in northern France. This was a pre-modern world that was profoundly interconnected. Ideas were not trapped within kingdoms or faiths. They were carried along the same routes as silk and spices, creating a period of cross-cultural fertilization on a scale we are only beginning to appreciate. This interconnected past challenges every parochial view of history. It forces us to abandon the idea of a purely Western Renaissance or an isolated Eastern Golden Age. Instead, we see a single, sprawling tapestry of human ingenuity, woven from threads drawn from every corner of the known world. The master builders were not working for a single king or creed. They were working for a shared vision of cosmic order, and they had a global network to support their work. Recognizing this does more than just correct the history books. It celebrates a truly shared human heritage, a foundation for our modern world that was laid not by one civilization, but by a silent, global collaboration. That medieval conversation across continents holds a profound mirror to our own hyper-connected world. Our digital internet, with its instantaneous flow of data, is the direct descendant of those slow-moving Silk Road caravans and merchant ships. We have recreated the same global nervous system, only now it operates at the speed of light. The fundamental lesson remains unchanged. Human progress has never been a solitary pursuit. It has always surged forward during periods of intense cultural exchange, when ideas are allowed to mingle and cross-pollinate. The soaring cathedrals of Europe, the sophisticated astronomy of the Islamic world, the monumental temples of Southeast Asia, these were not isolated peaks of genius. They were the direct results of a world in conversation with itself. When a society closes its gates, whether physically or intellectually, it begins a slow decline into stagnation. Its art becomes repetitive, its technology plateaus, and its vision of the world shrinks. But when a culture remains open, allowing foreign concepts to challenge and enrich its own traditions, it enters a golden age. The master builders of Cairo and Angkor did not see outside knowledge as a threat to their identity. They saw it as a tool to perfect their own divine mission. They were the ultimate collaborators, working across vast distances with a shared set of principles to create something far greater than any one kingdom could achieve alone. In our modern era of resurgent nationalism and digital echo chambers, this ancient blueprint offers a powerful corrective. The greatest walls we face today are not made of stone, but of algorithms that feed us only what we already believe, and of ideologies that preach cultural purity. The story of the hidden network argues forcefully against this isolation. It proves that our most enduring achievements are fundamentally hybrid, built from a mosaic of influences. The next great leap in science, or the solution to a global crisis like climate change, will not emerge from a single, isolated lab. It will be born from the same kind of open, international collaboration that once designed cities in harmony with the cosmos. Those ancient blueprints are more than just historical artifacts. They are a timeless reminder that building bridges has always been the true foundation of human civilization. Even with overwhelming evidence, the case remains tantalizingly incomplete. We have a mountain of circumstantial proof and a web of stunning parallels, but a definitive document, a single piece of parchment showing a Cambodian king's architect receiving a city plan from an Egyptian engineer, has never been found. This is the smoking gun that continues to elude us. The absence of such a direct record forces us to confront deeper, more fundamental mysteries. For instance, were there central hubs in this network that we have not yet identified? We know of great centers like Baghdad and Constantinople, but could there have been a crucial, lost nexus somewhere in Central Asia or the Indian Ocean, a place where master builders from across the hemisphere regularly converged? A city that served as the primary switchboard for this global exchange, its existence now buried under desert sands or coastal silt. Then there is the puzzle of transmission itself. How did these builders transmit such incredibly complex geometric data across language barriers without a standardized mathematical notation? They weren't emailing digital blueprints. The answer likely lies in a lost toolkit of physical and mnemonic techniques. Perhaps they used knotted cords, proportional rulers, or intricate folding patterns in leather or parchment that could visually demonstrate a ratio like the golden mean without a single written word. Maybe they employed sacred dances or rituals that physically enacted geometric principles, turning the human body itself into a living, walking blueprint that could be memorized and reproduced anywhere in the world. This was knowledge carried in the hands and the body, not just the mind. The most expansive mystery concerns the true geographic scale of this network. Did these threads of connection extend across the oceans to the pre-Columbian Americas? We see the same cosmic principles at work there, in the celestial alignment of Maya temples or the symbolic city plans of the Aztecs. Is this yet another breathtaking example of psychic unity, of great minds thinking alike across an impassable ocean? Or does it hint at a maritime network far more ancient and extensive than our histories have dared to record, one that connected distant shores long before the voyages of Columbus? These unanswered questions are not a flaw in the theory. They are its very lifeblood. They represent the open frontier of this investigation, an invitation for a new generation of historians, archaeologists, and even citizen scientists to pick up the trail. The puzzle is not complete, and the final pieces may be waiting for you to discover them. If this mystery has sparked a desire to see these patterns for yourself, the journey is just beginning. You can explore the language of sacred geometry firsthand with books like Michael S. Schneider's The Code of the Universe, which beautifully explains how numbers and shapes form the building blocks of nature and art. For the sweeping historical context of these exchanges, Peter Frankopan's The Silk Roads, A New History of the World, reorients our entire understanding of global history, placing these ancient routes at the very center of the story. But you do not need to be in a library to become an explorer. Fire up Google Earth and fly over the plains of Egypt or the jungles of Cambodia. Zoom in on the stark geometric outline of medieval Cairo or the vast, haunting rectangles of Angkor's reservoirs. From that vantage point, the master plan reveals itself in a way no ground-level photograph ever could. You can spend hours tracing the lines of ancient processional roads or the perfect circles of forgotten earthworks, all from your screen. For a more structured dive, many leading universities now offer free online courses in medieval history or digital archaeology, where you can learn the same tools and techniques that are reshaping our understanding of the past. The most exciting part is that this story is unfinished. New discoveries are being made every year by archaeologists using LIDAR and by historians re-examining old texts. Amateur enthusiasts often play a crucial role, spotting patterns in satellite imagery or cross-referencing local legends with geographic data. Your own curiosity is the most vital instrument in this ongoing quest. The Hidden Network was built by people who looked at the world with wonder and asked how it all connected. That same sense of wonder is the key that can unlock its remaining secrets for you. We began with a single question, a simple curiosity about the master plans of ancient cities. That question has unfolded into a breathtaking vision of a hidden global network, a medieval world humming with conversation. We have walked the celestial grid of Cairo, navigated the aquatic metropolis of Angkor, and traced the sacred geometry of Chartres, and at every turn we have heard them speaking a common tongue. It is a language built from the constants of mathematics, the predictable cycles of astronomy, and a profound, shared desire to build a world in harmony with the cosmos itself. This was not a world of isolated cultures. It was a world connected by the footsteps of merchants on the Silk Road, by the skilled hands of traveling master builders, and by the quiet scholarship of monasteries and madrasas that preserved this precious knowledge across generations. The myth of solitary civilizations crumbling in the dark is shattered by the evidence written in stone and star alignment. Our history is not a series of isolated peaks, but a single, sprawling mountain range, its ridges and valleys all connected beneath the surface. These city blueprints are far more than architectural drawings. They are the physical fingerprints of a connected humanity, a testament to a time when collaboration across vast distances was not just possible, but was the very engine of civilization's greatest achievements. As we navigate our own hyper-connected yet often fragmented world, the lesson from these master builders rings clear. Our greatest challenges and our most brilliant innovations have always emerged from the open exchange of ideas, from the courage to look beyond our own walls and learn from a distant neighbor. They built bridges of understanding that spanned continents. Perhaps it is time we relearned that foundational skill. If this journey through the hidden network has sparked a new curiosity for you, I would love to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below. And for more explorations into the forgotten connections that shaped our world, be sure to subscribe.